to everyone who's signed up and who's attending today, and welcome to the next instalment of a series of monthly webinars from P4P called In Conversation With. My name is Neil Young and I am one of the two coordinators within the P4P project. My background is primarily in business development within the third sector, and at P4P, as coordinator, I'm responsible for providing one-to-one support to social enterprises around collaboration and procurement, developing and running events and training such as these, developing new resources as well. In the In Conversation With webinar series, we're joined by a range of different individuals and organisations from the social enterprise and wider third sector who are either successfully collaborating themselves or are supporting those who are collaborating. So this could be for a variety of different purposes, but it might include to achieve greater social impact, generate more income, develop new services, or respond to an emerging need, such as needs which have emerged as a result of the COVID pandemic. So we kicked off 2021 with a webinar featuring Catherine McWilliam and Carleen Docherty from Development Trust Association Scotland. So they were kind of mainly discussing the vacant and derelict land project, which was really interesting. And so far in the In Conversation With webinar series, we've been joined already by Cooperative Development Scotland, the Glasgow Arts Partnership, Community Resources Network Scotland, as well as Scottish Mediation. And something interesting to note, actually, I didn't realise this until today, was that every guest that we have featured in our webinar until today has been female. So I thought I'd mention that as it was International Women's Day this week. So Angus, you've broken the chain. And in today's webinar, I'm delighted to be joined by Mary Sinclair, who is the Health and Community Food Sen Development Manager, that's quite a mouthful, Mary, with Sen Scott, and Angus Hardy from the Scottish Community Alliance. So Mary and Angus are going to be discussing the Pockets and Prospects project, which seeks to support community organisations with addressing mental health and wellbeing needs within their own communities. And through the project, community organisations have access to just a small budget to purchase activities from social enterprises that contribute to improved mental health. So I'll now let Mary and Angus introduce themselves and just speak a wee bit briefly about their background and current role.
Okay, I'll go first if you want, Angus. Morning, everybody. I always find these webinars really strange. I'm always so used to Sen meetings where I can see everybody, so I'm just going to have faith that you are all out there and that you're all tuned in. So as Neil said, I'm Mary Sinclair from Social Enterprise Network Scotland. So I support the health and the community food Sens. I've been at Sen Scott now for about 5-6 years, and I mean I'm just so impressed with how the Sens continue to operate and to share information and learning with one another. This background I've come from has been a mix of the broader third sector and between the NHS and kind of going backwards and forwards. You know what it's like, you're in one area and you think I can make a difference here, and then you think no, I'll try there. But anyway, I've now been firmly back social enterprise for some time. So I think that's all folk need to know about myself this morning.
Okay, me. So yeah, I work for the Scottish Community Alliance, which is a coalition of national community-based networks, of which Sen Scott is one. And there are about 23, 24. It kind of comes and goes a little bit, but yeah, that number of networks. So a very wide range of interests. broadly speaking, I suppose it's all about community empowerment and the different things that communities do to support themselves and to take action. And as an organisation, it's very light touch. It's just me, and it's really all about getting the networks together to talk to one another, to trust one another, to share resources, and so we do very little of our other than bring the networks together. We do run a couple of programs, one of which is the Community Learning Exchange, which is probably the best thing we've ever done, which is just simply very small amounts of money with very minimal administration attached to it, to help groups go and visit other groups who are doing things of interest to them, and the kind of the learning and the connections and the relationships that emerge out of that tiny little bit of investment are just fantastic and change what's happening in communities. And the other thing that we do, which is we're talking about today, is it's kind of come about almost by accident. I'll say more about it perhaps later, but it's essentially, I suppose, the same premise as the Community Learning Exchange, in the sense that it's very small amounts of investment that demonstrate the value of small amounts of investment, well placed, that can have very significant outputs. So, Mary, you are going to, I think, talk about this particular aspect of Pockets and Prospects, and I have to apologise slightly for that name, Pockets and Prospects. Nobody really understands. It's going to get lost in the mists of time about why it was originally called Pockets and Prospects. It doesn't really bear any relation to anything, but it's kind of it's stuck. So with apologies for that, Mary, do you want to explain what your project is?
Yeah, so just to give you a bit of information about the format that we're going to follow. So we're going to kick off the session with a presentation by myself discussing what P4P is and the support we offer. So that's in case you're joining today's session and you don't know much about us already. So it's a shameless plug. I make no apologies about that. And then I'm going to hand over to you, Mary, to do your presentation, and you'll speak a bit about the Pockets and Prospects project. There's then going to be a Q&A session following Mary's presentation where you'll get the chance to ask questions. And please note that you can use the Q&A function at any time to ask questions, and we actively encourage you to do so, so that the session is interactive as possible. And also please note that a recording of today's session will be made available later via our YouTube page in case you do want to go over anything. So I'm just going to share my screen now. Okay, so the aim of P4P is to increase the long-term sustainability of the enterprising third sector, including social enterprise. One of the main ways that we do this is to support social enterprises to develop partnerships or consortia with a view to then bidding jointly for procurement opportunities. We do, however, support collaboration more generally as well. So for example, collaboration to look at funding or collaboration around joint project activities. Core funding is provided by the Scottish Government Social Enterprise Strategy, and we are managed by Social Enterprise Network Scotland and governed by a partnership including SENSCOT, Cooperative Development Scotland, as well as the Scottish Community Alliance. So this slide summarises our activities. We concentrate on providing one-to-one support services for social enterprises which are funded. These focus on providing organisations with the knowledge and skills required to tender for contracts and with developing new partnerships. And you'll see there that we've listed a few examples of what that can include. such as support to develop a partnership agreement or memorandum of understanding, collaboration project plans, one-to-one advice on different consortium models that you could adopt, as well as facilitating development sessions around collaboration strategy. We run regular events and training, some of which are funded, like today. And we also offer a range of bespoke charged training sessions, including sessions on like our procurement skills accelerator. We also offer like train the trainer type services, so focusing on cascade learning around procurement. And we also offer a collaboration skills workshop, which is aimed at kind of funders. The P4P website is a great source of information on current and upcoming tender opportunities, as well as on partnership opportunities. There is an extensive resources database on our website. This includes our flagship toolkit resources, as well as guidance documents, templates, and case studies. Our flagship resources include our collaboration toolkit document, which is a self-help guide to developing a partnership over a long period of time, the 10-stage guide to procurement, as well as our guide on collaborating during a crisis, which has been one of the most downloaded resources on our website over the last year. We also offer a range of specialist consultancy services in addition to funded support. For example, our procurement health check service, which is a bespoke assessment and evaluation of your tender readiness, and through that you get a report setting out areas of improvement and your strengths in terms of your tendering experience and processes. We also offer bid writing services, research into market opportunities in procurement, and this month we launched a new e-brochure which sets out the charged training and consultancy services that we offer, and you can download that on the resources section of our website and on our homepage. In addition to our work with social enterprises, we also work with partners in the public and private sector. So hello if you're joining from public or private sector today. And our aims of working with the public sector are to engage in order to influence and shape procurement policy and legislation. And in terms of private sector, we have developed a social enterprise matching service to support private sector organisations with identifying and then effectively onboarding social enterprise suppliers into their supply chain. Whether or not you're applying for funding or tendering, you can generally categorise partnerships into the headings of either formal or informal. An informal partnership can be described as a partnership which does not have any legal status. This is usually best suited to shorter term projects where there's no commercial relationship between the partners. And a formal partnership is one, as you could guess, which introduces a legal kind of relationship between the partners, which is usually done through a partnership agreement or through setting up a new jointly owned legal entity between the partners. Partnerships for tendering or funding are a wee bit different, and these generally do introduce some kind of legal relationship between the partners. And usually there's kind of a lead organisation within that, but you could decide to adopt a kind of a jointly owned legal body such as a consortium cooperative. So I'm now going to hand over to and remember that you can post questions at any time using the Q&A function.
Okay, you know. You just need to bear with me, everybody, with my ability to multitask is not always great. So hi everybody, and I should have said maybe a wee bit about Sense Scott. Sorry, that was a bit of a miss off. So we're now Social Enterprise Network Scotland. And one of the key areas that we work in terms of supporting and representing social enterprise is around the thematic social enterprise networks. So there's the health and community food that I work with, there's sport, there's culture, tourism, employability, and there's now a rural SEN that Inspiralba support as well. In addition to that, there are, I think, around 17, 18 maybe now, local social enterprise networks that we work closely with and support. So if you want any more information on that, if you don't already know, I'm happy to share that with you at another point. So in terms of starting off with the sort of background as to how this particular Pockets and Prospects came about, I feel I'm going back a wee bit now, but it all kind of started off when the Scottish Government had started their consultation on the loneliness strategy. And at that point, obviously with the various thematic SENs, but particularly with the health SEN at this point, when we have sessions, everybody getting together, which has now moved to being online. One of the things that they'd said that they wanted to come together to talk about was that the work that they do around addressing loneliness. And what lots of them were saying was, that's what we do, it's a key part of what we do, whether we work in food or sport or a whole range of different things, but we don't necessarily say we address loneliness. So I think the development of that strategy was actually really important at the time. And when we brought the social enterprise, the network together to talk about that, one of the things that we asked them was, well, what can we do? What can Sense Scott do? What can the SENs do? What would you like us to do around that? And one of the things that they'd said, more importantly than anything, was around raising the profile of social enterprise and the work that they do in that area. So this was a few years ago now. So we worked to develop the first one of our briefings around loneliness and social isolation, featuring, you maybe just see some of the logos at the bottom. We had Lingo Flamingo, Roar, Seafine, and Badenoch and Strathspey Community Transport, and the #1 befriending agency. So we really used that to promote what social enterprise were doing in the area, and we're delighted that we managed to actually then have social enterprise referenced in the A Connected Scotland strategy that came out. So around the same time as we were doing that and raising that awareness and looking to promote social enterprise, we were in discussion with Scottish Community Alliance. So Angus, who you've heard from there, which is very much a network of networks, Sense Scott's one of the members of that network. And both Scottish Community Alliance and DTAS were involved in this Pockets and Prospects programme, as Angus has talked about. So with the general gist of it being that it was about small amounts of money going directly to community organisations, recognising that they know what's needed within their community. So Angus and ourselves had a chat to say, well, was there something that we could do around that in terms of the work that we'd done around loneliness? So there was access to some funding around it. The criteria in terms of what we were to do, or the sort of criteria relating to it, was firstly that it had to be activity taking place in the 10% most deprived SIMD areas, and also looking at the issue around loneliness. So given that at the time Glasgow was the Scottish pilot area for the campaign to end loneliness, and that a lot of the social enterprise that had come forward to be part of this initial discussion were part of Glasgow Social Enterprise Network, we then worked with Glasgow GSEN to develop this and take it forward. So in terms of this approach and how then this particular project emerged, so stage 2 there, we did the call out. Glasgow Send did the call out to their members, and we did for the Health Send members, asking who was interested in coming together to developing some kind of project to be able to deliver these particular outcomes. So on to stage 3, we had an initial meeting with over 15 social enterprises, and there was a general agreement amongst all of them, and a real mix of social enterprises, that they all recognised that there were social enterprises that were based within specific communities that had really good trusting relationships within there, and that they would be in the best place to be able to reach out to people who were experiencing loneliness. But what they wanted to do was they wanted to be able to tap into the expertise of other social enterprises in particular who had different areas of expertise in providing and engaging activities, but they previously hadn't had the resource to be able to or the awareness or knowledge of them to be able to do that. So from that session, what they came up with was that we would have 6 community anchor organisations. They would each have access to a small budget to buy in activities and services from the other social enterprise. And the social enterprises, so the community anchor organisations, that they would then work with their local communities to establish what folk wanted to be able to tap into and buy. So the Glasgow Send did the call out, and we had 6 community anchor organisations then established, agreed, and they would each have an access to a budget of £2,000. We then did the call out to social enterprise suppliers, asking them what their offer was and what their costings would be, and at the same time offered support to them in terms of developing their offer and costing if that was required. So we got that back and developed the first Pockets and Prospects menu. So at that stage we had 7 suppliers and offering 18 different activities. So then the menu went out to the community organisations. They would have a look at it, work with their local communities to see what they wanted to select, and then they would submit an order form to us, a nice wee simple one. We would then do the introductions, so introducing the community organisation to the supplier and to facilitate that connection at an early stage. And then from there, we really just let the community organisations and the suppliers go on with it and to arrange the dates and what they wanted and so on. Then on to step 10, activity service provision took place. And I do love the fact that kayaking was one of the activities that took place. So we like having a boat in there, okay? And then after that, once the activity had taken place, the community organisation completes a feedback form just to let us know how it went, what the benefits were. Social enterprise supplier completes feedback form, submits the invoice, and in receipt of all of that, we then pay the invoice. So that was the approach. That's what we were doing. That's what we did. So with that in place, you can imagine a whole range of different activities took place, from drama workshops to complementary therapies, language classes, daytime discos, murder mystery lunches, upcycling workshops, kayaking, raft building, the whole range of things. And I think the photos here are better than anything. One thing that if we were doing this again, we would ask for photos from the very beginning, but anyway, we've got some good ones there. So the feedback that we then got from the community anchor organisations as to how participating and engaging people in these activities had addressed loneliness and social isolation included a whole range of things. So from providing an opportunity for people to be able to leave their homes, offering opportunities and encouraging people to become more involved, to try new activities and to socialise in group settings. And also they talked about where friendships and really positive relationships had developed through the different activities that had then resulted in an increased confidence amongst people. and also talked about how bringing people together had actually started to create circles of mutual support. And then one of the ones, and I think this was something that probably quite surprised us at the time, was they had reported back that it actually made people feel empowered. So when people were sharing that common purpose with someone else, they actually had a sense of being equal to other people, and they would have something to be able to talk about with family and other folk. So, and then in relation to the range of ways that the community organisations talked about how the activities help to address anxiety over financial situations, a whole range of things, from simply providing a short respite for people from the daily challenges that they have in their life just during for the duration of that activity. Also, some of the activities were assisting people to be able to respond to different life changes in a more positive manner. Also providing an opportunity for people to be able to participate in activities that they wouldn't have otherwise been able to, either because it wasn't available within that local area, or they couldn't afford it, or there were transport implications. So a whole range of different issues around that we knew were positive. So we were confident that the feedback from the community organisations was it was supporting them to achieve these positive outcomes. And whilst we didn't want to, I mean, a big part of it was about keeping it straightforward as possible for the community organisations as they were participating within it. So, the feedback forms were very short, but what we found was that the community organisations were feeding back to us what some of the issues that people were facing and what some of the contributory factors were. So, and you'll see from that list there, I'll not go through all of them, but what was very clear was that in understanding the complexity around loneliness, that it very much reinforced that it's not just about older people being lonely, and about the role that poverty and issues around that can contribute towards it as well, which was something that the organisations had said at the very beginning was part of the work that they do. So, and I think what we can also see from this list is that it does show the extent to which the issues that they were addressing relate to wider mental health and well-being. So, and then the other bit, and the bit that Sense got that we were particularly interested in terms of what we do and our role, was looking to see how had it benefited the social enterprise suppliers. So, a couple of quotes there. But one of the key areas that said was it really widened their network and their connections, and really raised awareness of their social enterprises and activities and services that they offer. They also talked about helping to establish trust and relationships with others, and having that sort of broker facilitator role there had made that possible. They talked about establishing new contacts and future collaborations, but also talked about having an opportunity to demonstrate the quality of their work. And then from that, it then generated further bookings, brought in new customers, was new income for their social enterprises, and ultimately was then supporting them to become more sustainable moving forward. So obviously from SenScott's perspective, we were really, and from Glasgow Sen as well, because Glasgow Sen, over the 2 years we worked on this, were very active in every stage along the way of it. But we were also really encouraged that word had spread about the project. So in the second year, we went up to 24 suppliers with over 100 activities and services, and GSEN was then starting to receive inquiries about how could you become one of these community anchor organisations. So we were really confident in this simple and effective approach, and one of the things that most appealing about it was that it's small amounts of money, but that money stays within that community and has an impact. So we were really keen then to start looking at how we could further develop it and scale it up across Scotland. And then, as I'm sure happened to everybody last year, the COVID pandemic arrived. And obviously then our focus was very much about supporting our members through that, listening to them, finding out what their needs were. But there were two things that came back consistently through one-to-one discussions, telephone calls, SEND sessions. One was around mental health. So hearing back from social enterprises with real concerns about how on earth they were going to be able to deal with the anticipated increase in demand around mental health, given that so many of them were already operating within that area, whether it was that they were providing support for people experiencing mental health problems, whether it was around early intervention or whether it was around prevention and promoting good mental health, lots of activity around that. So we were really keen to listen to them to say, well, what is it that you're expecting to happen there? And I think at the very beginning it was like, well, we don't know, but we just know something's going to come from this. They didn't have the usual contact with folk in terms of their service users, but it wasn't just the people that were using their services that they were concerned about. They were also concerned about their workforce, their staff, paid staff and their volunteers, and also about the wider community and the impact that it would have. And then the second theme that came through continually was around the negative impact that the pandemic was having on social enterprise. For those that were unable to provide services, having to temporarily close and therefore not being able to trade or generate income. Those that had to reconfigure or redesign their services to comply with the various restrictions and guidelines, including lots of switching to digital delivery. But overall, in amongst all of that, there was a reported negative impact on the organisations financially. So given that we knew there was this increased need for mental health support, we knew that there were social enterprises providing a valuable range of support already within that area, and a lot of them would say that the existing needs around mental health weren't necessarily being met, and also that social enterprises were financially struggling. We thought, well, you know, we could apply this same model. It would make perfect sense in terms of being able to address these particular issues. So what we've developed this year, and I'm going to say a wee bit more about, is still using the same model. It works in the same fundamental premise that community organisations have access to a small budget to purchase activities and services from other social enterprise. But this time around, the focus is on mental health rather than focusing specifically on loneliness. But the key element, the key components of the model stay the same. So, and just as a reminder from what I've mentioned at the beginning, you've got the funding that's there, you have a broker facilitator role, and most importantly, you have the community organisations and the suppliers. So that's what we then look to do. So we approached Angus again for another chat to see was there any funding available around this within the pockets and prospects, and he confirmed that there was a small amount that was available. So we thought, right, well, what can we do around this? We knew lots of it was going to, based on the same model, but some real differences. So obviously we were going to be focusing on addressing mental health and wellbeing needs. What we didn't want to do was just to focus on one area, although working with GSEN had been really valuable and really productive, and we had felt it had tested the model. Through the whole of last year, we had so much contact with social enterprise across the whole of Scotland that we realised the same issues were taking place everywhere. So we wanted it to be a national approach rather than just focusing on one local area. And to help us do that, we then also approached another two of Scottish Community Alliance's members, so Scottish Communities for Health and Wellbeing and the Community Health Exchange, SCDC. So they'd both previously been supportive of the model we'd developed, and since all three of us as members of the Scottish Community Alliance had access to £5,000, we thought, well, if we pull that together, we'll be able to do so much more with 15,000. So with this sort of new partnership, we came together to discuss how we'd progress it. We agreed that given the expertise of Czechs and Scottish Communities for Health and Wellbeing, they would focus on the community organisations, they would identify them, and each of the community organisations would have access to £1,000 initially, and that SENSCOT, our role would be focusing on the call out to suppliers, so we had clear roles there. So, and then when we did the call out to social enterprise, we went across all of the thematic and all of the local networks, and also the memberships of Czechs and Scottish Communities for Health and Wellbeing, because what we said was, well, you don't have to be a member of a SEN, you don't necessarily have to be a social enterprise, but if there's something that you're providing that could help around this. So we went out to folk asking what were their what could they provide, and it wasn't just about providing support or activities for the people accessing the services of your community organisations. It could be in relation to the workforce, it could be in relation to people that access their services, or it could be in relation to the wider community, because we knew all of that was an issue, and we thought it's very much for the community organisations to decide what's going to be important or what's a priority. So we asked them for descriptions of the activities and the costs, given obviously the various restrictions. Lots of the activities that were offered, there were virtual approaches within that as well. So the outcome of all of that is that we now have over 50 social enterprise suppliers offering 170 different activities and services, ranging from yoga to therapeutic sessions to wellbeing walks, food and mood sessions, equine therapy, a whole range of things. And I can share that with you so that you can have a look and see what's there. So given the response that we had, we thought, right, that's going to be difficult to include all of that within one brochure. So we decided we thought it'd be quite quick to try and turn around having a sort of online platform that we could present these in. Because what we wanted to do was to be able to not just promote it, not just for it to be accessible for the community, the 15 community organisations that had the budget to be able to access the different services, but we also wanted to show other partners and organisations that there's this whole raft of really valuable services and activities available from the social enterprise and wider third sector. So this year it has the website address at the top, the collaboratingincommunities.org. So this has all the information about all the suppliers. You can search activities, you can submit different forums, whether it's to place an order or to provide feedback. And obviously we're in the fairly early stages. We're at the point where, and this is a bit, I think, what Angus mentioned earlier about the whole issue of trust. Folk put in their order form, we do that introduction, and then we have to trust that they're going off and doing that work, and we don't have that's not for us to interfere in that. So we're not at the stage yet of providing all the receiving all the feedback forms and so on, but what we do know is some of the examples of what people have accessed so far has been counselling sessions, mental health first aid course for staff, outdoor nature photography sessions, bike repair services to get people who enjoy being out on their bike, online workshop to create gratitude journals, which is, I really fancy that workshop myself, but anyway, creative family packs, and also access to the Feeling Good app as well. So looking forward to seeing what comes back from all of that. And please do have go onto the website and have a look and to see the different things that are there. So in terms of the relevance of the project to collaboration, I suppose this is really happening at a number of levels. There's obviously the collaboration between Scottish Community Alliance, Scottish Communities for Health and Wellbeing, Czechs and ourselves in coming to do this work. So as I said before, we're all part of that network. It's a very broad network, but we're three of the organisations within it that all have a particular interest in health. We all share a common belief that there's a real crucial role for community organisations to identify the solutions to issues that they're experienced within their community, particularly now at this time. And we all want to ensure that our own respective memberships are being as supported as best they can and put forward to be able to achieve what we know that they can and they're more than capable of. So we have our clear roles. Senscott, obviously, our focus has been around the social enterprise aspect, the supplier end, in terms of developing the structures. And for the others, it's been around the community focus and having that dialogue with them. But then there's also collaboration within the communities, and that's the key bit that we've wanted to emphasise with all of this. And that this involves a whole variety of combinations of community organisations and social enterprise suppliers working together. So one example is one of the community organisations. They've chosen to spend their allocation on mental health first aid training from another local social enterprise, and then they've invited staff and volunteers from other local organisations in addition to their own to participate. So it's a really nice way to see folk coming together and spending very thoughtfully to have the most impact. And then in one of the other areas, one of the community organisations is also part of the Spring Social Prescribing programme, and they chose to spend their budget on buying in fast-track counselling sessions for individuals that they're working with from a local social enterprise counselling provider. So there's obviously the what's going on just now, and a lot of that will emerge as we get the feedback. But we also anticipate that there'll be future collaborations that will emerge, as happened the first time around. One of it was in the second year of when we were working with GSEN in Glasgow. There was the Older People's Living Longer Fund, that's probably not its proper name, had come out, and the organisations at the time were saying, you know, the way we work together is actually really, really beneficial, and we could put in a collaborative bid. So, and that's where I have to say the P4P team were brilliant at facilitating a session for the group. And lots of potential there, but the problem that they encountered was that there wasn't one of those organisations that was actually in a position within that such a short turnaround that had the capacity to be able to lead that. But that's where I think when we look at the role of the social enterprise networks, whether local or thematic, we can see, right, how can we support that. And then there's also potential for social enterprise suppliers that are listed on the platform to approach one another. We ask folk when they're supplying their information whether they're open to collaborating and to develop and deliver activities with others. I think pretty much all bar one came back saying no, we're not up for that. And given that there's no guarantee that for any of the social enterprise suppliers that somebody will buy in their services or activities, so it does make sense for them where it's possible to collaborate with others. And again, we'll find out to what extent that's happened. So in terms of some of the lessons that we've learned through that, particularly around some sort of experiences and observations around collaboration. And I think this is reiterating at the beginning, so maybe it's not a lesson learned, maybe it's just a lesson reinforced. But community organisations, we can see that they do really understand the needs within their community, and they will collaborate with organisations and other social enterprises where there's value added and where there's an expertise that they recognise that they don't have. And that real willingness, I think it's important that the social enterprises have a willingness to be able to adapt their activities and services to be able to meet that particular market as well. And I think within that, building trust has been absolutely crucial. You'd have seen from a couple of the quotes earlier, that was one of the things that the social social enterprise suppliers had said was having that opportunity to develop the relationship and build trust was really important. And for the community organisations, it allowed them to see what the quality and the value of the activity was that was being offered. But also a trust developing in terms of both organisations being very clear and upfront about what their ethos and their approach was, what their scope was, so that the folk could have real conversations about whether there was elements of competition there. And then I think one of the things mentioned earlier is the fact that these very, very relatively small investments, so you're talking £1,000 or £2,000 going to one community organisation, can really have a huge impact. I mean, the first time around, some organisations chose to spend their full allocation on one organisation, on one supplier, and bought in a whole range and developed a programme around it. Others chose to spend it on 5, 6 different activities. But I think one of the examples just now, and I mentioned earlier, was there's one of the community organisation has spent their full allocation on £1,300 towards counselling sessions with a local social enterprise. So that's then enabling 4 local people to access a series of 6 individual counselling sessions. So the impact of that in terms of for those individuals, for their wider circles, families and so on, is really, really powerful. And I think the other thing that's really valuable is that the money's remaining within that community. And then following on from all of them, we know that once the relationships are established and the partnership projects start to emerge, further transactions take place. So organisations, once they've found something valuable, they'll find another way to resource some of the activities. And indeed, some of the organisations themselves, the community organisations who weren't, they didn't see themselves as a supplier, started to say, hold on, there's things that we could sell or that we could provide to generate an income. So they actually learned from the other social enterprises and were realised that we're perfectly capable of doing this, and we're able to provide support along the way with it. And then the last point I've just mentioned here is around this a broker facilitation admin role. And I think this has been an important part in ensuring that everything can run smoothly, because one of the key bits of feedback that we got very, very early on was that we're talking pretty small amounts of money, and that if there's going to be a whole form filling, invoice palaver, for the lack of a better word, around it for the organisations, it wasn't going to be worth their time. That was going to take them away from what they were doing. So a lot of what we have done is try to make the process as straightforward as possible, and to do that, and it has made a big difference. And I think that's only been the importance of that has only been further emphasised this year, in that Scottish Communities for Health and Wellbeing and checks, when they're talking, when the 15 organisations that they've put forward, those organisations are up to their eyes and doing a million other things. So it needs to be really straightforward for them. So I think that's something that we can talk about later. And then in terms of looking ahead, I know you'll maybe have questions about this, but we feel that the model is applicable to a wide range of issues, regardless of what it is. And we're keen to explore and to see how we can develop that in more ways. Also, we know that there's an increase in need for mental health support, and we know that the sector can provide that, and that we're now starting to see folks starting to collaborate and doing some of that. So we want to be able to see how we can develop this model, or to roll it out to be able to capitalise on some of that. And just to finally mention that we have had growing interest from a range of partners, and folk love the idea of it and are really keen, but it's getting folk to secure some money there to be able to have that pot of funding that can actually enable it. So I'll finish up there if that's okay.
Thanks, Mary. That was really interesting. We've had a few questions in, and I've also got a couple of questions I was going to ask. So first dibs from myself. Do you think there's a potential for some of the social enterprise suppliers to deliver services as a partnership in future rather than just as individual organisations?
Yeah, I mean, definitely, and I think we'll see that happening. In fact, I'm just seeing there's a comment from June from West Lothian, who are doing work. West Lothian, Sen have been doing a lot of work with social enterprises within that area who are involved in mental health, and have pulled together a lovely brochure showing all the different things that they do. And I think environmental health kick, that's it, that's you, June. Doing really brilliant. The way that it's presented, showing that there's so much that they can provide, but also working really closely together and understanding that there's enough work for all of them that's there. But the issue is about being able to show statutory partners that here's all these valuable providers of services, but it needs to be resourced in some way. So I think the example of the way West Lothian have taken that forward, I think, is really inspiring, and I think there will be others who'll certainly do that as well.
Worries, yeah. I mean, have you had an approach from West Lothian around kind of delivering through it, or no?
Well, no, with West Lothian, so that's the West Lothian Sen have supported those organisations. I think yourself were maybe involved in some of those discussions as well. So, and I think it shows really nicely how, particularly at a local level, how that can happen. And I think that's one of the things that we're keen to see happen with this. Obviously, we're working on a national level, but what's really nice is when you see groups that are all active within a particular local area, when they come together and they can then make that approach for funding or resources or contracts or whatever to do that, then I think that's where the power of that working together is really valuable, rather than us at national level trying to get people to do that, if that makes sense.
Say something at that point. I mean, it seems to me the model that you've developed, Mary, as you say, at a national level, is equally applicable at a local, regional level. But I suppose, I mean, it's just that this approach is, I mean, it's still working with the public pound. And the issue, as you've been saying at various points in your presentation, was, you know, how do we get this resource from government effectively into communities? And I suppose the whole process that you've been describing represents a kind of departure for government. And to take it back a stage from when it started, first of all, it was a kind of, there was a bit of loose money swashing around Scottish government at the time when welfare reforms were coming in. And John Swinney was saying, oh, we've got to do something to try to kind of soften the impact of the welfare reforms. And so that's when they had the conversation with DTAS, and for some reason we were there as well, to say, is there some way in which we can do this, which isn't just going to be to set up yet another big fund that community groups, organisations have got to apply to? Because in a sense, that's self-selecting. Only some organisations, one, are going to hear about it, two, have the capacity to make the application, three, can be bothered with all the bureaucracy and the evaluation and all the report writing. So there's so many sort of barriers to access that kind of money from the small organisations that are actually doing stuff on the ground. And so in a sense, I see this, the way you're doing it, but also the way other networks have done it, not so much in a collaborative way, but just in terms of pushing money out into their members, is that it's a kind of Trojan horse. You know, so government is spending millions of pounds in the community sector in one way or another, but largely speaking, it's big chunks of money that organisations have to apply for. And this is saying, well, you know, why don't we use the kind of the experience and the intelligence and the knowledge that we've got on the ground, either through anchor organisations or through networks that are closer to the ground and have got the relationships, who understand the needs of their community. And if, you know, and there are people in government now who are beginning to recognise that actually that gets better outcomes. You know, if you trust people on the ground to spend the money, as and when they feel fit, then you're going to get better outcomes, rather than setting up a big fund which has got criteria that organisations have to sort of meet to get the money. And often, by meeting those criteria, they're moving the focus of the application away from where it's most needed. So this is about trust. It is about trust and relationships, I think, fundamentally. And the work that you're doing with Scottish Communities for Health and Wellbeing and checks and all the social enterprise providers is about building up that trust. And as you said, you know, all of those kind of relationships, the kind of social capital that is generated through this process is just gold dust, really. And what we've got to do is hold on to it. So we've got, I don't know if there's anybody, it's frustrating here, I can't see who's actually listening in here, but if there's anybody from government or anybody from the health boards, this is, you know, this is important stuff to take account of, and you'll get much better bang for your buck if you push money down this route than simply just filing it down the old traditional, perhaps safer way in terms of public accountability. But I suspect there's very little money going astray through this process, and you're definitely getting very, very positive results.
Do you think there's other, one question that both kind of I was thinking about asking, and also it came in from Claire on the questions there on the Q&A, was, do you think this can be replicated in other service areas?
Absolutely. I mean, I think so many community organisations and social enterprise are addressing or trying to address a whole raft of government policy areas. So whether it's about increasing physical activity, whether it's about improving health and wellbeing, all of that. I mean, so for example, you could have something that has a focus around access to sport and physical activity. I mean, you've got a sports in there with organisations that are very engaged within local communities, so which is spread right across the country. So I mean, that's one area you could have, and you could have it around improving diet and healthy weight. I mean, but it could be anything, because the one thing is that when we look at social enterprise and the whole range of areas that they work in, they don't, I think there's something in that they don't work just in their own wee one department area, like the way sometimes I think Scottish Government can be perceived to be. So you split them all out. They recognise all those different parts. So there are always going to be other social enterprise that they can draw on to help deliver that.
I mean, I'll give you an example. Just before this webinar started, I had a conversation with the person who runs the network Social Farms, Social Farms and Gardens. And so they work with a lot of community growing groups, very small, often unconstituted, certainly unfunded, just working on voluntary effort. But she's been able to, with a small bit of pox and prospects, just a few £100s, putting small amounts of money into things like tools, buying tools for these groups, that transforms how well these groups are able to function. Now, how are these small groups in communities, which not only is it addressing food agenda, it's addressing the mental health agenda, there's a whole gamut. By buying a few shovels and forks, you know, you make it possible. Now that these groups are not going to be able to access public funds in any other way, but it's only because of Social Farms and Gardens' knowledge of these groups and their working relationship that they know that that need exists. So it's a no-brainer for me that we've got to get the resource down into communities and trust people in the communities to move it on and to make the difference at a very, very hyper local level.
Okay, thanks for that. And we've kind of had quite a lot of comments to the chat. One from June, who was kind of talking about delivering the first aid mental health training that we were talking about. And we've also had a question in from Ricky, who's saying, would anybody here be interested in collaborating on a project to take forward social enterprise role for financial advice during and post-COVID? So actually, believe it or not, that's us at 12. So that's actually all we have time for. So
there's a question there about participatory budgeting from.
Okay.
And I think you're saying, is that effectively what we're talking about? And it is another version of this, I think, because in a sense, participatory budgeting, wherever the budget comes from, the local authority or Scottish Government, you're putting that money into communities and then allowing a PB process to distribute them. So yes, that's the same. It's trusting local people to make a good judgment, and also it's giving local people the opportunity to engage in those kind of decisions, which in itself is kind of empowering. So PB is another one, yeah.
Certainly is related. So special thanks to Mary and Angus for agreeing to take part in today's session, and for all the individuals that signed up and attended today and have taken part in the kind of Q&A and chat. Check out the P4P website for access to our resources and to understand what types of services that we offer. And can you remind me what the Pockets and Prospects URL was there?
So it's
I'll put you on the spot right at the end. So
collaborating in communities.
.org, isn't it?
.org. Collaboratingincommunities.org.
There we go. And again, a recording of today's session is going to be made available later via our YouTube page, and we'll be promoting that out via our usual channels. So, and keep your eyes peeled for who's going to feature in our next webinar, and you'll be able to sign up via Eventbrite like normal. So thank you everyone, and thank you Mary and Angus.
Thanks very much for having us. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.